Welcome to the Nerdy Multiverse. House of the Dragon is back with the 9th episode of the series, and this episode really brought a lot of new conflict and raised the stakes. And it had a lot going on in it that has to be talked about, of course, so let's break it down and give our thoughts on the new episode titled The Green Council. Before we get started with this episode though, we want to give you all a spoiler warning as we break down this episode. There will be tons of spoilers, of course, whether it's for the episode itself, the original Game of Thrones series, the source material, or our predictions possibly coming true in the future of the series. Now that all of that stuff is out of the way, let's get started with the 9th episode. The title of this episode being The Green Council represents an event that happened in the books, but also how the entire episode focuses on what we call the green side of this story, which includes the High Towers, Alicent, and her children that she had with Viserys. And how in this episode, the other side, which has been referred to as the Blacks, which is Rhaenyra, Daemon, their children, and their allies, are not present or seen in this entire episode, but only mentioned, as the story here mainly focuses on King's Landing and the High Tower's plans that fold out after Viserys' death. We open up this episode with a lone piano note as we see different shots of an empty and dark King's Landing, seeing the empty Iron Throne representing how it is truly empty and without a king now that Viserys has died, and how this now empty throne has to have a new heir seated in it. King's Landing completely empty besides a boy who walks through the halls, crossing through the courtyard room, which is of course where Cersei Lannister in the future puts down the map of Westeros. The boy goes to Talia, who is Alicent's handmaiden and who also is an informant for Mysaria, and this boy is most likely informing her of Viserys' passing, as he was likely one of his servants. Talia goes to the queen and informs her of Viserys, and you can actually see that Alicent did genuinely care about him and grew to love him, as she grows extremely emotional after getting the news. The first person that Alicent goes to speak about the fate of her husband is her father, Otto Hightower, and we do hear that she definitely did misinterpret what her husband was telling her when he was dying, and that her decisions were not just made out of a lust for power. Otto takes these words as an opportunity to gain power, while Alicent just wants to fulfill what she thought her husband's last wishes were. And they also speak about who else knows about Viserys' death, and Alicent says that Talia does, as well as some other servants, and this comes into play as they wish to keep his death a secret until they can get their plans in order and move towards the throne, which is exactly what they did in the books, except that it was stretched out within a longer period of time as they kept Viserys' body in his chambers for weeks, and the rats began feasting on it, but in the show, this seems to only take place within a single day or two. Whether or not only the servants know about the passing of Viserys, Talia is lighting some candles right next to a window, which is most definitely a signal to who she is an informant for, Mysaria. We cut to the council's room, where we begin an event that was also in the books, known as the Green Council, which also happens to be the title of the episode itself. In the council, we find out that most of this council, along with Otto himself, have been plotting for this day for a very long time. And this whole council meeting plays out very differently than it was described in the books, specifically for Alicent herself. As in the books, it was often described that the plotting was all led by her. But here in the series, we learn that this was kept as a secret, and she did not know about any of it. Speaking of their plans and how they're going to deal with people that are in King's Landing that are still loyal to Rhaenyra and Daemon and to Rhaenyra's claim to the throne, as they wish to remove men from the Gold Cloaks that are still loyal to Daemon from when he was the captain of the City Watch. And the Gold Cloaks are what they call the City Watch men, of course. Splitting the treasury of the kingdom away from the hands of Rhaenyra, Tywin Lannister, one of the ancestors of Tywin and Tyrion Lannister, Lannister from the original show, has split them and moved it to 4 separate locations, that being the Iron Banks in Braavos, the Vaults in Casterly Rock, Old Town, and King's Landing. King's Landing, of course, being where they are right now. Casterly Rock, which has been ruled by the Lannister house for years. Braavos is ruled by the Sea Lord, which is an elected position, and if you remember Syrio Forel, he was the first sword to the Sea Lord, and Old Town is the city that the Hightowers rule over. The council did all of this without Lord Beesbury's knowledge, who is the Master of Coin, and he ends up speaking out against all of them, accusing them of treason, and eventually going as far as accusing one of them of being responsible for Viserys' death themselves. In the books, Beesbury's fate is described by different people and in different ways. One says that he was sent to the dungeons for speaking out against them, where he ended up dying, and another described his death as coming from the hands of Sir Criston Cole, who apparently cut his throat. Somewhat similar to the second description from the books, Beesbury is killed by Criston Cole here in the council meeting, but this was not due to his throat being cut. He was instead pushed down onto the council's table. Harold Westerling, who is the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, draws his sword on Criston, and Criston says that he will deal with Harold because of the disrespect that he showed to the Queen. But he in fact did not disrespect the Queen whatsoever, and Alicent just tells him to put his sword away. Otto tries to make up a plan to have Rhaenyra and the other contenders to the throne who are staying at Dragonstone killed, where he says that Westerling will take his men to Dragonstone and take them out. But Westerling refuses and removes his white cloak, resigning from his position and refusing to become an assassin for the Greens. Much like how Sir Barristan left the Lannisters' side in the original show, and much like how he ended up going off to join the opposing side and being alongside Daenerys Targaryen, I believe that we will be seeing Westerling go off to join the Greens' opposing side and be alongside Rhaenyra. After Westerling leaves, Tywin Lannister mentions Storm's End in Lord Boris, who is a Baratheon and also the cousin of Rhaenys Targaryen, so the Baratheons in this show may end up taking the side of the Targaryens and Rhaenyra. Alicent goes to visit her daughter Helaena, and once again, Helaena says some very foreshadowing sort of stuff here, which may mean that she has the gift of green sight, much like her own ancestor did, Aegon the Conqueror, who gets mentioned quite a bit in this episode. Helaena basically predicted or foreshadowed Aemond losing his eye after he got his own dragon, and in this episode, she says to beware the beast beneath the boards, which very well may be her predicting what happens at the very end of this episode, but there could also be much more to it than we know, such as what happens in the books, and these are big spoilers for the books, and that may happen in the show, so skip a bit ahead if you wish to not hear about any of this. So when Daemon asks Mysaria to send assassins into the castle to kill Aegon's children, and we know that Mysaria is referred to as the White Worm, this could be what the beast part refers to, and beneath the boards could be foreshadowing the assassins sneaking through the castle. Helaena makes a design of a spider, playing into how she has always observed and studied different insects instead of dragons. We also see that Aegon and Helaena did in fact already have children, having twins, and the 2 children being Jaehaera and Jaehaerys. Otto sends Sir Eric and his twin brother, who is also named Eric, just spelt differently, to look for Aegon in the city as he is missing. And we see this play out as a race to who can get him first, as the Queen sends Criston to search for him as well, and Aemond joins him. Father and daughter working separately, as the two have completely different goals, as Otto wishes for Aegon to be brought to him so that he can then request for Rhaenyra and the others to be killed, and Alicent wishes for him to be brought to her so that she can spare her friend's life as well as her family's and just have them surrender the crown. They end up locking Rhaenys in her chambers, and she looks out the window and sees a group of people being escorted by the guards. I believe that this is the group that Larys and the guards have put in cells, and the group is made up of the people that know of Viserys' death. The search for Aegon begins as the 2 separate groups begin asking around about him and his whereabouts. And we cut to the throne room, where Otto stands near the throne trying to gather the different houses and lords to see who stands stands with Aegon and who stands with Rhaenyra, as the ones who still stand with her and her claim to the throne were most likely taken away and killed, as they were potential allies to her, therefore threats to Otto and his side's plans. Lord Caswell, who has always been openly loyal to Rhaenyra, he was even the first to greet her after she gave birth to Joffrey. He pretends to show loyalty to Aegon and he bows, but we do later see that he tries to leave King's Landing, but is caught by Larys and brought to Otto, where they then decide that he will be dealt with, and we see his fate later on as he was hung. As the Eric brothers search around the city for Aegon, they are followed by one of Mysaria's spies, who eventually confronts them in what is basically a fighting pit where people come to watch children fight each other. She tells them that she can bring them to Aegon, and in this arena building, we learn that Aegon does have bastards around, and we see one of them sitting in here. We know how much Aegon really doesn't care about being king, and would rather just go around getting drunk amongst other things. And we hear exactly how Aemon feels as he wishes he was king instead. The Silent Sisters are wrapping up Viserys' body, most likely preparing it for the Targaryen way of burial, where they are burned by dragon flame. The Silent Sisters being a part of an order in the church that worship the 7 new gods. Once again, seeing the emotion that Alicent has coming from the loss of her husband, and she places his crown on his body, and I wonder if we will see this crown get stolen, as once again, spoilers from the books, Sir Steffan Darkland steals the crown and takes it to Rhaenyra, which is most likely going to happen in the series as well. But we may see Sir Eric or Harold Westerling steal the crown in place of Sir Steffan. Alicent goes to visit Rhaenys and tries to plead with her to show loyalty to Aegon, attempting to gain more allegiance with those that may be loyal to Rhaenyra, especially because the one that rules over Driftmark has the most powerful naval fleet in the realm, and Rhaenys has the Red Queen, her dragon, who is named Malice. Otto meets with Mysaria after the twins were brought in with one of her spies, and they discuss the location of Aegon, and we hear that she is holding him in the Great Sept. And the twins find him here, but he tries to run away as he does not wish to have anything to do with becoming the king. They are met outside by Aemond and Criston, and we get some fighting as Criston fights Eric while his brother Eric watches over from the balcony and walks away. Aegon tries to get Aemond to let him go so that he can just take a ship and sail off, which would in turn make Aemond the heir to the throne instead, and we can see that Aemond was most definitely thinking about this for a split second before Criston came in to take Aegon. Otto gets letters ready to send to different kingdoms throughout the realm by Raven to gain information on their allegiances. With Aegon being taken by Criston and Aemond, Alicent has won this part over her own father, and she even confronts him about it and the way that he has been lying to her for so long. Very creepy meeting between Larys Strong and Alicent, where he offers her his services if she is in need of removing somebody, whether it even be her own father. Now, I definitely don't want to talk about what he does here, as it is gross and super creepy, but a big part of his obsession or creepiness with feet is because he himself has a deformed foot and has often been looked down to because of his disability. Rhaenys is broken out from her room by Sir Eric, who seems to have loyalties with Rhaenyra rather than the Greens, whom his twin brother seems to have his loyalties with, and they try to escape as they walk past the skull of Balerion, who was Aegon the Conqueror's dragon, and the skull we have seen in previous episodes. A hooded figure walks away from a building that is burning down, and this is Mysaria's home, and this could have been ordered to be done by Larys, or this could be the work of Otto himself. The citizens of King's Landing are being pushed into the dragon pit, where they are holding Aegon's coronation, and Rhaenys ends up getting caught up in this, but this is actually where she wanted to go to get her dragon. Alicent with Aegon in a carriage head to the coronation, and she ends up passing the dagger that Viserys had to her son Aegon, and this is where the passing down of this dagger will stop, as Aegon does not recognize the significance of the dagger or the history of it and what it is meant to be used for, and that being the destruction of the White Walkers. As the crowds enter the very much intact dragon pit, which of course was completely destroyed in the original series. The coronation begins, and Otto, with a smirk smirk on his face informs the crowds of Viserys' death and his quote-unquote final wish of Aegon being named heir, as Rhaenys listens and watches from the crowd. The ceremony begins and Aegon enters, and when he is crowned by Kristen, just like the books, he is given the crown of the first of his name, Aegon the Conqueror, and he is given Blackfire, which was the sword that the Conqueror wielded. When this is happening, Rhaenys sneaks off to the chambers below the crowds, and Aegon is crowned and now named King of the Andals and the realm, with the bells ringing and the crowd seemingly showing their newfound loyalty to the king. And with the love of the crowd and all of the cheering, you can see the changes within Aegon as he is now going to take on this role as king, especially now that the hundreds if not thousands of people are showing him love, something that he often said that he felt he lacked, as he thought his own father did not love him, and he even asked Alicent in this episode if she loved him. But just like Helena said earlier, there is a beast beneath the boards, as a dragon breaks through the floor and Rhaenys on her dragon and in her armor, which has a dragon scale type of design on it, standing right in front of the opposing side. If only she said one word, this whole thing would end right here and right now, stopping the Targaryen civil war, the dance of the dragons, before it even begins. But instead, she turns around and flies off, leaving King's Landing behind, most likely flying off to Dragonstone to inform Rhaenyra of what has happened, based off what we have seen in the next episode's trailer. And as Alicent looks off in relief that her and her son's life was spared, the episode ends. This series continues to be absolutely incredible, and with only one more episode being left in this season, you can really feel the tensions rising and rising. I really enjoyed how this episode focused on just one side of the storyline, and we got to see the different perspectives of all of the characters playing the Game of Thrones and trying to gain more power. Alicent and Rhaenys really stood out to me in this episode personally, and the entire series has really brought light to this universe and the fandom. And it's great to see how everyone has come back to watch this series, and how it really feels like a sort of redemption after the 8th season of Game of Thrones and the disappointment that it brought to many fans. Overall, this episode was another great entry, and I cannot wait to see what unfolds in the season finale next week. But with our quick thoughts out of the way, make sure to let us know your thoughts on the 9th episode in the comments. With all of that being said, thank you all for watching. If you are new here and you would like to see more nerdy content just like this, feel free to sub to the channel with notifications on. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like on it. We will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.